On the surface, One Piece seems like a cheerful shonen adventure series. In many ways, it is exactly that, but it also has its share of deeply disturbing moments. That's what makes it so complex. It doesn't just stick to one mood, and it explores its world in all of its facets. Some of these shocking anime scenes revolve around enslavement, cruelty, child experimentation, illness, and other devastating subjects. Which ones upset you the most? Well, before we begin, please kidnap the like button and throw it into a volcano, and please subscribe to my channel and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any daily uploads. Now, let's begin. 1. Kozuki Oden is boiled alive. No form of execution is going to be pretty, but Kozuki Oden's demise is particularly grisly. He's submerged in boiling oil, but he holds his men over his head on scaffolding in order to try and protect them from the same fate. The pain is undoubtedly excruciating, but he insists on staying positive throughout the whole thing, dramatically claiming that Oden isn't Oden unless it's boiled. But his bravado soon comes to an end when Kaido shoots him in the head. 2 Law escapes from Flevens. Trafalgar Law grew up in a city called Flevens, which was beset by a serious illness called Amber Lead Syndrome. This disease was not contagious, but the world government acted as if it was and put the city under quarantine. But they took it further than that. Law's parents were taken out by an extermination crew, and the hospital they ran was burned out. In order to escape with his life, Law had no choice but to hide under a pile of remains that were being shipped out of the city. All of this when he was just a little boy. 3. Sanji's father locks him in a dungeon. Sanji's father, Vinsmoke Judge, is one of the worst dads in anime history, and this really crystallizes the reason. When Judge decides that there's no way Sanji will meet his expectations, he decides to pretend that his son perished and holds a funeral for him. Meanwhile, he locks him in a dungeon with a metal mask over his face. His siblings eventually figure out what's going on, which leads his sister to try to help him and his brothers to come to harass him further. Eventually, he escapes with his sister's help, but not before going through some serious misery first. 4. Charlotte Linlin devoured her caretaker. As a child, Charlotte Linlin had a completely insatiable appetite and a tendency to destroy everything around her. When she was 5, her parents left her on the island of the giants in the care of Mother Carmel. It seemed like things were going well at first, but she ended up going on a rampage during a 12-day fast. In order to get away from the wrath of the Elbaf residents, Mother Carmel took Linlin to another location, where they celebrated her birthday with delicious treats. Linlin was so happy that she ended up eating everything around her, including Mother Carmel and the kids from the sheep's house. Perhaps the most upsetting thing about this is that Linlin was probably better off afterward. Carmel pretended to be nice, but she was actually planning on selling Linlin into bondage. She saved herself from that gruesome fate. 5. Kuma's current situation. Bartholomew Kuma caused the Straw Hats a lot of trouble, but that didn't make it any easier to see what became of him. Dr. Vegapunk modified his body to turn him into a cyborg, that is, a super-powered cyborg. Eventually, this led to him losing his free will, personality, and memory. He is now enslaved and for rent to be used for whatever purposes the world government desires. Knowing that that's his fate is just heartbreaking. 6. The Buster Call on Ohara Island. The world government wants to make sure that all information about the Roadstones stays hidden. To do that, they'll resort to extreme measures. This included eliminating the entire island of Ohara, along with nearly all of its residents. In order to prevent them from uncovering or sharing information the government wants to keep hidden. 7. Dr. Hogback's whole thing was Sindri. Sindri was once an actor who Dr. Hogback was romantically obsessed with. When she perished, Dr. Hogback stole her body and revived it as an obedient zombie servant. He claimed to have no use for her personality and essentially rewrote it in order to be more pleasing to him to keep her in line. He did things like kick her and make her lick the floor. It's great that she was eventually able to assert her own will, but the fact that any of that happened at all is horrifying. 8. Dr. Hiroluke's death. Dr. Hiroluke's death was one of the most upsetting aspects of early One Piece. Not only was he up against the thoughtlessly cruel despot Wapol, but his body was also already shutting down from a combination of a terminal illness and a poisonous mushroom that Chopper fed him thinking it was a cure. When Wapol had him executed, Chopper realized that the mushroom was poisonous, making things even worse. At least there was that beautiful moment later where his research finally came to fruition, but that doesn't make this part less painful. 9. Brook's lonely trip at sea. After entering the Florian Triangle, Brook and the rest of the Rumbar pirates are bombarded with toxic weapons. Unfortunately, the only doctor in the crew passed, so there was nothing they could do to stop its effects. One by one, the members of the crew lost their lives. Because Brook had eaten the Revive fruit, he was able to come back to life after succumbing to the toxic, but he had to spend 50 long years alone on the ship after that. As Ken, he couldn't steer the ship himself, so he was at the mercy of the sea. 10. Robin says she doesn't want to be alive. When Luffy tries to help Robin escape from a collapsing temple in Alabasta, Robin refuses his help at first. Why? Because she's so miserable and hopeless that she no longer wishes to be alive. She tells Luffy as much at this point in the series. Most of her backstory has not been revealed, but her raw misery is still quite apparent. This is a shocking moment, as scenes such as these are rarely expressed in anime, especially in shonen. Luckily, Luffy saves her despite her objections. 11. Toko watches her father's death. Few things are more heartbreaking than a little girl watching her father be executed. Shimotsuki Yasui sacrificed himself in order to mislead the shogun and help with Kazuki Momonosuke's revolutionary efforts. But he probably didn't plan for Toko to watch it happen. But she did, and she was as miserable as one would expect. She even tried to heal him using Usopp's toad oil, but it was to no avail. This scene hurt even more because thanks to eating a smile, Toko could not fully express her emotions even though she was clearly devastated. 12. The auction at Sabaody. One Piece deals with some tough topics including enslavement. After escaping capture multiple times, a mermaid named Kami finally finds herself up for sale in an auction house. Seeing anyone in such deplorable conditions is upsetting. When Hatchin and a few members of the Straw Hats decided to try and buy Kami's freedom, a world noble named Sharlos fired at Hatchin. It totally makes sense why Luffy felt the need to haul off and punch him, even if the consequences for doing so would be dire. 13. Queen infects people with homemade viruses. Viruses are frightening enough when they're not being fired at you by the person who created them. Queen not only invents life-threatening, highly contagious viruses like Mummy and Ice Oni, he also sends them flying at his targets in the most vicious way possible. This has always been scary, but if you're finding out about Queen's moves for the first time after 2020, it's even scarier. Well, there are other terrible moments I could tell you, but I'm too lazy to get into them. If this video gets a 100 likes, I'll upload the other 10 remaining terrible moments in one piece. Thank you for watching. Please let me know which moment terrified you the most. Anyway, please tell me your thoughts in the comment section below, and please subscribe to my channel and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any daily uploads.